Greetings, one and all. This is the Brain Software Podcast, and I'm Chris Thompson. Today on podcast episode 130, Mike Mandel and I discuss and answer questions from you, our listeners worldwide. Stay tuned, because it's bound to be informative and perhaps insane. That's right.
Hey, man. What's happening, Scroll? So much going down, Smeg. It's quasi-dimensional to the max, pouch. But you're in luck today. The ether wind's gone all Ziggy Stardust, Scroll, so hang in there. Ride the storm with Uncle Dave Ambrose, because the periodic table says it's time to bop in the beater, right, Chris?
You bet your positrons, Dave. But apart from that, there's a really important question making the rounds, especially since the Toronto Raptors are now the NBA champions. Woo! Whatever happened to that old tranquility we used to know? These are days of victory! So let's welcome to the center of the hypnotic masticator, a former stage performer who supports thespians everywhere, the living, breathing, hypnotic hammer of Thor, Mike Mandel.
Hello, what's going on? What's all this shouting?
Yes.
We'll have no trouble here.
Yes, I can hear you, Clem Fandango. All right.
Hey, buddy, doing good?
We are here. It is the middle of summer. It's hot. It's sticky. It's amazing. And we're going to Vegas soon where it's going to be even more hot, but thankfully not as humid.
Man, we are rocking. It's fantastic.
Yeah, we're getting ourselves in good physical shape for Hypno Thoughts Live. And let's begin. We have a great podcast lined up, and we want to dive right into the content, which is mostly Q&A from all of you around the world. Do we have to
promote anything,
We
though?
don't have anything. I don't think I want to spend too much time on
how
promo.
about some time?
Other than I will, I'm going to mention that we have over at MikeMandelHypnosis.com/events. You're going to see a few interesting things. So first of all, if you haven't yet signed up to HypnoThoughts Live, it's absolutely worth going to this conference in Las Vegas. Check it out. It's on the events page of our website. If you miss that, then I want to mention the next couple of things coming up from us are in November. Actually, first we have October. We have Michael C. Anthony coming to do a stage hypnosis and performance and demonstrations and Mendelism course. All happening the weekend of October 19th and 20th. Again, you'll find that on our events page, MikeMandelHypnosis.com/events. And MCA, Michael C. Anthony, the man himself, is the guy that you have described as the world's best stage hypnotist.
Well, I want to go beyond that, Chris. You know, I did stage hypnosis for 44 years. And Mike is one of my best friends in the world, you being the other one. And the three of us are sort of the three musketeers in that regard. But he is probably not only the best stage hypnotist on the planet, I honestly believe he's probably the best one who has ever lived, and I'm not kidding.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he is an amazing, amazing presenter. He's got a real flair for combining magic
Excellent
and Mendelism.
entertainer.
So he's going to show you some skills that will make you hypnotically confident in group and demonstration type of settings, even if you don't want to start a new career as a stage hypnotist or anything like that. So check that out. And then, yes, we're heading to London in the UK, around Heathrow Airport. And again, all of this is on the events page, but we are teaching Wizard School in November. Carl Smith is helping us organize that over there. And then we are at the UK Hypnosis Convention, followed by a one-day mindscaping certification. I understand our class is already quite busy.
Yes, and one day we'll get you certified mindscaping. You can use the term in all your promotional material, and you'll find this great modality will work well with whatever you're doing.
Right. And then we come back, and in November, then we are teaching the architecture of hypnosis the week of the 18th
at
of
the
November.
Hypnotic World Epicenter
Here in
again.
Toronto. That's right. Okay, so that's
done.
it. MikeMandelHypnosis.com/events. I'll probably mention that again at the end of the podcast,
And
too.
again, I will not
All right.
interrupt the URL.
Yeah. All right.
I got the think tank sorted out. I brought it up to the cabin with me so we can spin the dials
All
and
right.
get those crazy
What
words that we learned to
words?
apply. The words today, we got three of them. The first one is thread.
Okay, thread. All right. Are we going to go through them all in sequence and then discuss?
Let's give them all.
Okay.
Now. So thread, followed by Highlander, interesting.
Ooh.
Followed by crisis. Wow, thread, Highlander, crisis. What comes to mind with that?
I'm not even sure I know what Highlander means other than it was a
means
movie.
you.
Yeah, it means you. That's good. You know what? We're going to have to come back to that when we answer
right.
one of Ken's question about bullying.
Oh, wow, okay.
Highlander, okay, I'm going to skip that one because I just don't even really have a good meaning for it other than
I think you've lost
a
the
movie
thread
with
here.
Christopher. Wasn't it a movie with Christopher Walken? Highlander or something?
It was
Or someone else?
it was Sean Connery.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, there you go. I've lost the thread. So that is exactly where I was going. This thread to me is about staying on the topic long enough to get to resolution rather than, Ken Sweatmaning and back and forth and changing details and opening all kinds of loops and then forgetting what loops you've opened and never resolving anything, which can result in a crisis in the quality of your communication. Speaking of that last word, crisis. So if you do not do a good job of maintaining threads, perhaps there will be a point where you reach a crisis.
Well, I like Highlander myself. You realize from the last training we did, I met that fellow from Glasgow whose name was Stuart Glasgow.
Oh, that is the coolest name ever.
He's helped me refine my Glaswegian accent.
I was going to say,
Highlander,
and we'd like to welcome Bob Burns to the podcast.
He'll be here one day. But Highlander, I'm thinking of, I see the image of a Scot wearing the great kilt, the large kilt. He's got the claymore sword. He's powerful. He's terrifying because he's a Scot. And as we say to our martial arts students in British Jiu-Jitsu, never get in a fight with a Scot, because even if you win, you're going to the emergency ward.
So to avoid
tough.
crisis, make sure people like that are your friends.
That's right. Make friends with Scots.
Yeah.
But how is this applying to hypnosis and so on? I think, Chris, you can apply the whole idea of thread even to Ericksonian hypnosis, because when we're talking in Ericksonian language and are weaving this tapestry, unwinding that long roll of paper and writing on it with constantly changing, constantly changing meaning, we have to ensure that we are maintaining the thread so that it is leading to resolution of the subject's problem,
it is leading
not just
to a
showing off.
destination. It's not just a bunch of nonsense language. And speaking of, so with crisis in there, clients are more likely to change when they're already at a point where they see their life in a crisis.
Right.
If they think, oh, well, maybe I should change because this could be bad for me down the road.
Or my wife wants me to.
They're not going to change. But if they see it as they are right now in a health crisis or an emotional crisis or something that they must change, they're at threshold.
And that's a good point, too, because the key is when we're dealing with stuff, and you and I have done a lot of self-work. I mean, you've cleared your allergy to dogs. We've done a bunch of personal stuff too. We're great believers in continuously growing and changing and becoming more integrated. That never stops this side of eternity. But you want to fix stuff before it reaches crisis level. If you got a fire in your kitchen, you don't want to say, okay, well, let's wait till the curtains are going up in flames, and then I'll go and look for that fire.
That is a really good metaphor.
Peanut butter sandwich, Yeah,
I love that metaphor because it's ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
Nobody would sit there and go, oh, well, the kitchen's on fire, I'll just wait a little longer. No, you recognize that is a crisis. Or if you don't put the fire out, it's going to very quickly become one that is expensive, smelly. You move out of your house for a while. Well, nobody's going to go, oh, yeah, just wait. But when it comes to our health,
let's talk about James Esdale. He removed an 80-pound testicular tumor from one of his patients. Why did the guy wait that long? Testicular tumor is a crisis.
This was in the 1800s
1880s,
in India, right?
Yep.
Yeah, very, very bizarre
Well, the other thing, Chris, is if you and I don't hurry up and book our flights to the UK,
we'll be in a crisis because we'll have a
bunch
bunch of people who have paid to take our class and we won't be there. That would suck.
But that's a whole
no, of course we're booking our flights. Right. All right. So let's get on then to the Q&A. We have several questions that have come in, and let's start with...
You want to do one of the live ones?
Let's do. We have two that were sent in audio and then a few that were sent just via text, so we'll summarize them. So the first question is from Julie in Melbourne. So let's play that now.
Hi, Mike and Chris. Julie from Melbourne, Australia. Usually hear people talk about procrastination in regards to avoiding things that you don't want to do. But what about if you're feeling stuck in inaction because you can see several paths laid out before you, and each of them aligned with equally beautiful, if different, coloured roses? How would you recommend evaluating your options so that you can move forward congruently?
What a great question. I can see people procrastinating from things that are unpleasant. If somebody detects they've got a bad tooth and they're afraid of the dentist, they're going to procrastinate going to the dentist until it pushes them to threshold. But when it's because there's options, that's a totally different thing. Recognize that Chris and I are great believers in having options, because the law of requisite variety says that the element with the most options will be the controlling element. So you should always have, as my mentor Derek Balmer said, at least 3 models of the world. Now, when you have one thing, that's a dictatorship. You got to go with that. If you have 2, you can be stuck like the mule between 2 piles of straw. Yeah, which one do I eat? But when you have 3, typically one will jump out as being the better one. Now, you're saying many options, so I'm presuming you have at least 3, Julie. So here's what I'm saying. Write down your options, and now you can either do a PMI on them, as we've talked about. Plus,
minus inventory.
Yes, as we talked about in previous podcasts. Write down all the pluses, all the minuses of if you do this option, and then anything that's interesting that doesn't fit in the other 2 categories. Now, when you've got that, it's not you count the number of pluses and the number of minuses and the bigger list wins. No, what this does is it forces you to evaluate all the information before you make a decision. So a PMI is a great way to do it. Here's another way that works for some people. You've got a bunch of options on the table. Instead of determining which one you're going to do, you say, if I had to strike one of these off the list permanently, which one would it be? Well, I don't know. Of course you don't know, but if you did know,
which one would it be?
Strike one off the list. Then look at the remaining ones and keep doing that until you only have one left.
If you imagine it something as simple as you've got 4 restaurants to choose from, which is the least appealing to you in that moment?
Yeah.
So
the carb one.
you're striking that one off, at least for tonight, permanently, right? Going to make another decision tomorrow. But okay, now there's 3 left. Which one will we definitely not choose as our top choice?
Yeah, well, if you had to do without one,
even
which
if
one
you just get that far, at least you're down to 2 now, and you can figure it out. I want to offer you another reframe on this as well.
Nice.
Again, let's say we are choosing between 4 restaurants, and we're having a hard time making up our mind because they're all beautiful roses of different colors, as you nicely said. Well, there is a 5th option, and that's the one that you are choosing when you choose nothing else, and that's the option of doing nothing.
Oh.
And that writes all 4 options off permanently.
Buddy, I've never even heard that. Did you just come up with that now?
Yeah, I was just thinking about it.
That's freaking genius.
You're basically,
you're
adding an option. The option is do nothing. And that's probably, this is a technical term here, the suckiest outcome of all, right?
Now, that's a brilliant reframe, Chris. And you can imagine how hard it is for me
to
say
admit
that to you.
Yeah. That's okay. That means there's something else you're planning that's very horrible coming up for me. So, all right. So, Julie, I hope that helps. This is the classic analysis paralysis. People get stuck sometimes because they're not sure what to do. It could be, I've just come into some money and now I'm not sure how to invest it. I'm not sure which financial advisor to hire or which exchange traded fund to purchase or whatever it is. Better to do something, even if it's imperfect, than to do nothing at all and leave that money under your pillow and let inflation just evaporate it slowly but surely.
Yeah,
right.
The tooth
so if you think of it that way and pick your own metaphor,
nice.
Which flower do you want to put in the vase? Well, if you don't put any in the vase, they're all going to just die.
Yeah.
Right.
That's really clever. I'm serious. So okay, let's see if you can handle the next one brilliantly.
Now we are going to go on to Brandon from Utah, who has an audio question. So let's put that audio question in here now.
Hey guys, my name is Brandon Neff. I am a chiropractor, but I have also done stage hypnosis shows on the side for about a decade. Anyway, I would like to incorporate more hypnotherapy into my chiropractic practice. I am still somewhat new to hypnotherapy, but I am an old dog when it comes to hypnosis for entertainment. So outside of throwing in some Ericksonian verbiage now and then to get people to comply or to have some pain reduction, I'm just wondering what maybe some tips or tricks that you guys could offer for that, knowing that a cervical adjustment is probably a wonderful PGO spike, and anything I say immediately after that will likely have a positive effect. And for the record, I usually say, that's right.
What an absolutely amazing question. Thanks, Dr. Brandon. That's interesting because I had never even considered the possibility of a PGO spike as a result of a cervical spine adjustment. And I can completely see that would be the case because if anybody adjusts Atlas and Axis on me, it's like, whoa, this stuff really comes out. It's just unreal.
And a quick reminder for those of you who do not know what a PGO spike is, we're talking about the spike of signals in your brain that runs through the pons, the geniculate body, and the occiput that happens every time there is some element of shock, surprise, novelty. What else am I missing
That'll
here?
cover it.
Okay, so you are essentially derailing the brain's critical faculty temporarily. So whatever is said in those moments of shock, novelty, surprise are likely to have a better chance of getting through to the unconscious mind. So if somebody says, don't panic, the obvious, it's scary situation, don't panic. The don't part kind of gets ignored in that moment and people freak out. But if you were to say to somebody, oh, you'll feel so much better now after that cervical adjustment, they're likely to take in that comment, accept it as a suggestion.
Now, recognize, too, with the PGO spike and our student and colleague Christophe, who's a psychiatrist from France, he came to Toronto to study with us. We saw him again in England, and he said, he confirmed as a psychiatrist, he said a PGO spike clears the mind to accept suggestion. Mm-hmm. The more intense, the more powerful the spike on these neural pathways that are like a superhighway, the longer the response will last. So that's what we say about people who've gone into shock. Their prefrontal cortex is essentially shut down for sane, rational information, and they're in flashing brain mode, and that's why they look stunned and so on. Remember the example I gave of hitting that car in the rain, and the woman was fine, and I said to her, did you see, he just took off. Why did he stop in front of you? And then that's the story she was telling when we got to the police, because neither of us had to have our insurance go up. It was somebody else's fault, a non-existent person. Of course, I'm making this up, and in case
there's any hidden microphones.
Right. No, there's anything wrong. Yeah.
Hidden microphones.
What you might want to do, Brandon, that's kind of, a huge microphone in each of our faces. What you might want to do is consider seeding the suggestion.
Yes.
And saying that, when I do this adjustment, not only will it feel amazing, but you'll instantly relax completely through your whole body and take on a new sensibility of health and
idea,
wellness. And you can actually... The amazing thing about this, and this is really talk for another podcast, seeding a suggestion is saying in advance what's going to happen. But Stembo talks about this. He talks about what he calls pro-hypnosis, and he goes into considerable depth about seeding suggestions. And then I started doing retroactive pro-hypnosis, which is referring back to a suggestion you never gave when the person comes out of trance. And that works too. So clearly, if you're doing stage shows for 10 years, Doc, I think you're going to be awesome with this. And to frame it in the positive. And if you see the suggestion in advance, work out your embedded commands. I long to hear what you do with this. I think it'll be amazing.
Yeah, and this was going to be the angle I wanted to take on it is, remember, as Mike said, you can use embedded commands, and you can use something like the quotes technique to bury your embedded command, to insert your embedded command. A lot of clients have come into my office with this similar type of injury, and after the adjustment, they just notice that they tend to feel better really quickly. So those are things that you can do. Seeding the suggestion. I'm glad you brought that up, Mike. It's so powerful. And then, of course, as you're chit-chatting, you can just casually tell stories. So remember that Ericksonian hypnosis can involve a lot of metaphor. So you can directly just tell people stories and notice that they'll change. That's right. All right, where do you want to go from here, Mike? Is there anything else on Brandon's question before we move on?
I think that covers it pretty well. And I said, as a guy with a stage performance experience, he'll negotiate this pretty cleverly.
Oh, that's the thing that came up in my mind too. Well, if you're a stage performer, obviously the idea of congruence, intention, calibrating your audience, all that stuff is something you're very, very good at already. Just do the same thing you're already good at. It's just a different context.
Yeah. Yeah, and then come to Toronto and study with us live. Absolutely. We've had a few chiropractors go through our class. One in the last one.
Oh yeah, that's right. We had quite an uptake in the number of MDs, chiropractors, other professionals that have taken our classes. This is a lot of fun.
Yes.
Come to Toronto. Tons of fun. All right, our next question. Quite an uptake in the number of Australia.
Ooh, another one.
This is a text question, so we wrote this down a couple of weeks ago when we were collecting them. So let's see how well you remember it. Kelly in Australia wants to know, how do you communicate with your partner who is ultra sensitive and takes everything to heart and takes things personally? If I disagree with her, if I disagree with her viewpoint, I'm doing it on purpose, and everything I say is contradictory, and it feels like I'm constantly walking on eggshells.
Ooh, okay, that's a real tough one.
This is an important one to really discuss.
There's no easy answer for this. When someone is super sensitive and when they're taking things personally, sometimes they're mismatchers, and sometimes just they'll do the opposite automatically. I have a distant relative who does that. And also, a lot of this can be anxiety driven. If there's a huge amount of sensitivity where people anticipate being criticized, you will know this from their handwriting. And it shows up in the small letter D and the small letter T. And what you'll see is a normal T or D does not have a loop in the upright stem. It's just a straight line. The larger the loop in the small letter T or D, the more sensitive the other person will be to criticism. If it's a very large loop, this is someone who has their antenna on full and is anticipating criticism and will hear everything as that. And it can be one of the most remarkable things. If you have a small loop, you can be sensitive to other people's feelings. If the loop is getting large, then the person will really take things badly. If it's in the D, they'll take things personally. And if it's in the T, they'll take things badly if it's said about what they do, their work. So one of the first things you can do is get a sample of this handwriting and check it out. If you're finding loops there, just ask the person to do an experiment. Make it a fun thing. And don't say the reason why. And have them do 1 month, just practicing writing 5 minutes a day and making T's and D's with zero loop in the stems. And it takes about a month to change the behavior, but therapy absolutely does
work.
work.
If they feel that you're criticizing their handwriting? No, I'm kidding. That's an interesting comment. I forgot about that characteristic in handwriting because you've taught it, of course, to me many times, but you've taught me so many things. I mostly drop what I learned from you and pick it up later eventually.
Just
and go, oh yeah, that's right. This is some important
pointless,
stuff.
yeah.
All right, but we did talk about this briefly as well, Mike, that it's important for people to feel that they will be heard, that they can communicate directly, that they don't have to walk on eggshells, right? What was it that you said to me? Do you remember?
About eggshells?
No, just the idea of it's really important to be able to feel secure that you can speak your mind.
Oh, yeah. It's assertion instead of aggression. And the real key with this is if you get into a discussion about this, do not interrupt. You have to let the somewhat wounded person ventilate their stuff before you can make any kind of correction. And I always just unpack it with the same 2 questions. What exactly do you mean? Well, I feel it. So can you explain more about it? Get them to unpack
Tell me more about
Do some
X.
information gathering.
Right.
How do you know to feel sensitive? How do you know it's time? Well, it's that thing you do with your voice. Just unpack it first.
And ask the question, what would you like to have happen?
And ask, how do you know that's true? Like, what is your evidence for this? You can often unpack it. This is where clean language is phenomenal. I worked with someone on the weekend up at our cabin. And just in a conversation using clean language, completely undid some familial problems just by asking the right questions. I recommend, here's your homework. You want to fix this relationship, Kelly, and make things sail smoother? I recommend you go out and buy the book, Clean Language by Judy Rees, R-E-E-S, and read it through 3 times with a highlighter. The 3rd time through, you'll get it, and you'll find you can be clean-ish in your communications and unpack this really, really well without stepping on your partner's toes.
Here's one more idea for you as well. Mike has always said this, humor unlocks the model. Right.
Right.
So
John Grinder.
What state do you want somebody to be in when you're having these kinds of conversations? Well, a laughing state, having fun state is less likely to result in somebody feeling criticized. So have fun together, not laughing at a person, laughing with a person at anything that helps a couple laugh together will make them both feel great, and they'll be much more likely to have an open conversation where they don't feel criticized and they don't have to be walking on eggshells.
This is not the sort of conversation you have after sharing a bottle of wine. That will tend to shut down a lot of the rational thinking and bring in too many emotions.
Yeah, it's too much serious. We're sitting here relaxing, having a chill conversation.
And watch out for anchors as well. Like anchors are stimuli that are attached to a state. And I said in my own life, my wife and I started having these stupid arguments, and I realized intuitively it was every single time I had on a particular CD, which was a Dan Gibson nature sound and music CD, quite relaxing. It was the one called Central Park, and I loved it. But I tested it. I stopped playing it, played other CDs. That's before downloads and streaming and so on, and we were fine. And then one day I put it on again, and within about 8 minutes, my wife was really pissed off.
That's
with
totally
me.
weird.
And it was anchored to that state, so I just don't play that one. Find out what's being anchored. Find out what's anchoring the bad states and stay away from them or overwhelm them with something positive.
Awesome. Okay, let's move on to Karen in North Carolina, another written question. And let's see if this goes well. I had a client a while back who was unhappy with her former hypnotherapist. One of the things she said was that the person, quote, said a few things to her and then asked her if she was in a trance. I listened without response, except to say that everyone had their own methods, but I have to ask, is this some way of checking on trance that I've just never heard of? I thought it was just bizarre, but I'm sure there are lots of methods I haven't heard of. Sure, never heard of that one. Thanks.
What do you make of that, Chris? I'm going to throw that ball in your court because I have my own ideas about it.
You know, it feels like I've got to take my kids to the orthodontist today to have their braces adjusted.
Is this true, or are you making up a metaphor?
It's totally true.
Okay.
And you know, so it's a dentist office, right?
Uh-oh.
The last time I was at the dentist office, the dentist didn't say, so did you feel like I got all the filling, all the cavity out, or, you know, whatever it was. That just, it is bizarre, Karen. I completely agree with you.
So do I.
I would not want to ask a hypnosis client, so do you feel that you were in a trance? Remember, which podcast was it many months ago? We joked about the book that said the person comes out of trance and you look at them as if you're really concerned and you say, are you okay?
Are you okay?
Are you okay?
Yeah. Are you all right?
Implication. There's some chance that you're not
there's
okay.
Some indicator that they aren't, that you're picking up on, like ridiculous.
So that is, to me, Karen, and I'm sure Mike is on the same page here based on what he just said, that's completely ridiculous to poll the client on how they felt about whether they were in trance or not.
I find it just ineptness. There's a lot of inept hypnotists out there, which is why we started this hypnotic storm in the first place.
That's right.
So go to someone worthwhile, somebody who knows how to fix things, get in and out and help the person. But this kind of stuff, I think in a way, it's not, I'm not saying inept in a nasty way. It can come out of lack of confidence. Maybe you were this person's third client ever or something. There
are still a lot of people who've been taught to read scripts, and that's another example of not having a proper toolbox.
Right.
If being taught to read scripts to me is like the equivalent of buying a TV dinner, what we used to call the TV dinners, or some like all the ingredients sort of put together for you. Actually, HelloFresh is another. We've used it here. I don't particularly love it, but
I haven't.
You're being handed a set of ingredients, a recipe card. You're given every single instruction, but you're not learning to be a chef.
Oh,
you're learning to
assemble
something. And learning to read a script at a person is similar. You're not given a full toolbox. You don't know how to think for yourself if you practice this. And we're still getting people every single week asking us questions like, if I join your hypnosis academy, will I have access to scripts?
Yeah.
And I just respond every time saying, no, you won't, because we don't teach those. We don't encourage those.
And what if it was in every area of life? You go into the dentist and he's not looking at your mouth and making decisions based on what he's seeing. He or she, not saying wrong with it. Instead, he's got a card, like a cheat sheet
that says,
cheat sheet's one thing.
Start with this particular drill.
Ask the client this. Do you feel? Yeah,
it doesn't make sense anywhere else, right? You don't go to a lawyer's office, let's say, to defend yourself against
he's looking down
running
under
through.
The table.
Yeah, I accidentally run through a stop sign. He doesn't pull out the stop sign script. It's just, yeah. All right. Anyway, I don't know how we got on the script thing, other than I brought it up. But
buddy, before we go to another question, we have to take a commercial break.
Okay, we're going to take our commercial break, and then we're going to come back and finish the questions. So let's do that now. Tonight on the Johnny Brookman Dingtilasia Network.
Hey, Dad, the most amazing thing happened today at school.
What's that, son? Did you build a skyscraper out of watermelons?
No, Dad, nothing like that.
Let me guess then. Did you figure out the cube root of Black Stallion?
No, Dad, please listen to me.
Okay, Thomas Edison, stop waving your arms around. This isn't a grain elevator,
I know, Dad. I know it's not. But today at school, they let all the boys go into the home ec class, and all the girls went into the woodworking and metal shop, and we did each other's work, and then they brought in this awesome chef called Jamie Oliver from England, but he said Jamie O.
I bet he did, son. I bet he did.
Yeah, Dad. Anyway, he was making a dish with duck and cilantro, and he asked if anybody knew another name for it, and I yelled out coriander, also known as Chinese parsley. And he said that was the perfect answer, and the class applauded, and I sounded like the kind of kid who could be a real chef someday.
Hold the hell on, Gordon Ramsay. Sounds to me like somebody's getting way too big for his britches.
But, Dad...
No buts, Nigella Lawson. What you're best at is mediocrity. Remember, you're still just Danny.
Yeah, I guess so, Dad.
Now get out and play with that little white balloon your mom and I got you for Christmas.
Okay, Dad.
You're still just Danny, tonight at 10:06 p.m. on the Captain Rick Green Network.
All right, got another one for us, bud.
Okay, yes, we are pushing along in the Q&A queue. The Q&A queue. All right, where were we here? We had just finished the question on... Oh, it's lower down. We had just finished Karen's question from North Carolina. So now, our good friend Ken in Quebec, and he has asked a couple of questions. We're gonna hit both of them. First question from Ken is, do you have to use the element induction as your starting process for getting someone into the Esdale state?
Okay, well, let's deal with that first. No, Ken, you don't. It's a good question. The reason we use the element induction as a means of getting to the Esdale state is you must have somnambulism prior to getting to the Esdale state. You've got to cascade the person from a waking state down through light trance with the... we're using eyelid catalepsy in the element, right down through somnambulism. Only from there can we move them into the Esdale if they're ready to go at that time. The reason we use the element induction is, although you can do this with any induction, you will then have to do a lot of deepeners and so on to get them to the point that you know you have somnambulism, whereas the element has all of that built in. It just streamlines the process, and you can go naturally into the Esdale state from there.
And what is the Esdale state, Mike?
The Esdale state was discovered originally by James Esdale. It has many names: coma, hypnotic coma, which is
very
an
unfortunate
name. Plenary trance, meaning
the
complete
basement of trance.
Yeah.
I like the basement of
trance. That's a good one. I like the Esdale state.
Not a scary basement. You know.
Anyway, no, not a terrifying basement full of like weird memories and hands that come out of the ground. We're comic geniuses. No,
it is a very deep trance, very deep state of hypnosis where people will not even respond to you. It's not that they
won't
can't
respond to do anything physical.
Yeah, they won't won't move their fingers. They won't open their eyes.
It was given the name the Esdale state by Dave Ellman in Fargo, North Dakota, when he rediscovered it. And Esdale used to take 2 hours to get people there, including working with helpers. And Ellman found a fast way of doing it, which is brilliant.
So, answer, no, you do not have to use the element induction. It's just a really elegant way to teach it. Yes. Okay, now Ken asks another different question. It's not necessarily hypnotic, although you could see that it is. Do you have any tricks to mess with the mind of a bully? Okay, so this is kind of a nice one. Now, I'm not sure what you mean by bully. Are we talking emotional bullying, physical bullying? If it's physical, then I would say jujitsu, choke him out, dust him off, send him home.
Send him home, yeah.
But if it's emotional bullying, it's just somebody who's being a jackass, for lack of a better term. Well, jackassery.
Let's get to this. First of all, one of the things you can do is there can be bullying without any physical contact, as everybody knows. I don't want everything to be seen as bullying nowadays, which is, everything's abuse now. You look at someone wrong, it's abuse, and that's ridiculous.
Bullying has to be targeted and repetitive.
Or continuous, ongoing. So let's look at a quick example here, how I undid it for my friend Rick Watts. Many years ago, Rick was a TV producer and director, I think. Back then, I haven't seen him in years, but back then, he had tickets for the premiere of the Robin Williams film Popeye, which opened in Toronto. It was a pretty bland film. Robin Williams was brilliant. And anyway, in this film, we went afterwards to this pub, and there were a bunch of people sitting around, and there were guys across the bar from Rick and I, and they were business types, and with the button-down suits and stuff. And Rick is very preppy, and he wore like a really prep sweater and a leather tie back then, and he's kind of Archie Andrews looking. And I could tell these guys were mocking him. They kept looking over and sneering and making comments that we couldn't hear, and I just couldn't handle it anymore. So short of physical violence, I got my pint of beer. I made eye contact with one of them, took a sip of the beer, and grinned at him and let the entire mouthful of beer just run out of my mouth and down my shirt and stared at him without blinking. I think it took 10 seconds before they left the bar.
They cleared out of there. Right.
No, I'm not saying you walk around with a can of beer so you can do this, but you can mess with people's heads.
Because
in really clever ways.
Created this program in their mind that this guy looks like a psychopath.
Yeah, it looks like he's nuts.
I don't want to mess with him.
And the non-blinking is part of it. Now, another thing you can do, though, is you can enlist the aid of even the bullies cronies and helpers without them knowing you're doing it. And the way you do it is when he makes some comment, some snide remark or whatever, say something under your breath and look at one or more of the others sort of out of the corner of your eye and smile as though this is something that you're all in on that he doesn't know about. And it will undermine his credibility and also his confidence at that point. But it's interesting because the metaphor today that we'll get to is about bullying.
All right. The other one we want to offer you is the Jerry intervention.
Oh, yes.
So somebody making, dickish remarks, whatever it is.
Technical term.
You have to be very congruent. You have to deliver this with conviction and just say, Jerry was so right about you.
And they'll say, Jerry who?
And you say, I think you know.
Yeah, right about what? I think you know.
Yeah, either you.
Well,
at that point, you're right.
You.
What are you talking about?
Talking about you. Where does this come from? Comes from you.
Yeah, comes from you. And it's always the downward inflection at the end. It comes from you. It's not, it comes from you, right? Make sure you deliver it properly. Comes from you?
Yeah.
It's you. Jerry was so right about you. It's fantastic. So just use that one. And then, okay, we were just planning this podcast and we thought we will throw this one in because this is such a great response to anybody who is, as we're going to call them, an a-hole. This is a family-friendly show.
Okay, yeah.
So if somebody is an a-hole, Mike, what is our favorite go-to?
Well, I had a friend who was also a Mike. We worked together for a while at Bell Canada. And
this is his, right?
This is his.
This is his line. It's
really,
so brilliant.
He delivered it as though something is just dawning on his awareness. He's having an aha moment. We're sitting in a bar in Toronto called Zanzibar's many, many years ago. And still there. And it's not a place I would frequent now. But anyway, we're in our early 20s. We're sitting in this bar having a few beers.
And some guy was being dickish. Some guy
came over and he's being really, really dickish. And my friend Mike looks at him as though something has just dawned on him. And he smiles. He points and he goes, oh, you're an a-hole, aren't you? Like,
you gotta have we've discussed this. You have to have a face that transforms from sort of, I'm not really sure what's going on, to this look of realization, like you just found those keys that you couldn't find.
Yeah.
And you're so pleased with yourself
you're one of those
for having realized
it.
Oh, yeah, and you point in a friendly, jovial manner.
Like it's all making sense now. Like I can't help it.
I get it. Yeah.
That's a good one.
You're an a-hole. And you say the actual word if it's more impactful, I suppose. So there are a few strategies right there. And I would call upon our listeners, let us know if you'd like more strategies like this, because Mike and I actually have a working document. I won't tell you the working document title.
No.
But we actually have a whole bunch of these that we might turn into a deck of cards or something, or video training at some point. Lots and lots of fun.
Right.
All right. Now, we have a final question that we're going to throw in here.
All right.
That came from one of our online students. And basically, she wanted to know about dealing with a particular client who's a smoker who has expressed an interest in quitting smoking because a friend had used hypnotherapy and had a single session cure for smoking, and though this person now wanted to give it a try. But as it turns out, our student, who's in Washington State, had a client that is far south of her, didn't want to make the drive all the way to her town, and only had a budget of a couple of $100s. And so, of course, red flags galore right? So we wanted to bring this up in the podcast because it's a really good summary of this topic of threshold. And we talked about it earlier in the empowering questions.
Yeah.
Not empowering questions, sorry, the
thing.
Think tank. The think tank. Think tank.
That thing.
Yeah. Yeah, when we can't think of a word, I love how you just call it the dingus.
A dingus. Put it on the dingus.
The dingus, yeah. The think tank. So we were talking about threshold, right? So if somebody is saying something like, well, I don't want to make the drive, or I don't have more than $200 to spend, we saw a really great response in the Facebook group from Kate in the UK.
Oh, yeah.
And Kate had suggested, if the person doesn't have enough money, truly doesn't have enough money for whatever reason, what else can you have that person do? Maybe you can have her volunteer at some sort of volunteer organization that you can somehow validate. Get the person to put in X number of hours of volunteer labor somewhere, soup kitchen, whatever.
This is very Ericksonian.
It's quite smart.
Like an Ericksonian
Make
ordeal.
them do something. Yeah, an
Trim your
ordeal.
rose bushes.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually quite a smart idea, and I just wanted to call.
You said a smart idea.
Smart idea. I wanted to call
Let
Kate's
that out.
idea out. Kate, if you're listening, you know who you are.
Yep.
And it's a great,
Really good.
So people have to convince you that they are ready to change.
You see, Chris, now you just nailed it there. They have to convince you.
Right.
I had so many times I've said to people, smoking cessation can be a great way to earn money if you're good at it, if you only take people who are at threshold. And Ken Guzzo, our friend, is probably one of the most skilled in the world at this and in teaching this. And I'm sure he'd agree that if they're not at threshold, you're just wasting your time.
Nothing's going to happen. And that's why you have to charge them enough money.
And the fact the person's only got $200 is because they're blowing so much money on stupid cigarettes. How much are they? You know, like
Probably a lot. I've never bought any. I've never even
Not
smoked
for
one
years.
in my life, so I don't know. Yeah.
Right. They're
No
expensive.
idea. Yeah. So hopefully that is helpful. When people want to change, it is not your job to convince them that they need to change.
Right, and the whole
you
thing
can
about
help
them
them
giving
once
it a
they've
try.
already convinced themselves, and that is true for anything. It can be the
Yes.
person who's complaining about their job, or complaining about their physical shape, or complaining about their relationships, or whatever it is.
Yep.
You can offer help once somebody has asked for it.
And you don't
Right?
want them to just want to give it a try and see if
Yeah.
it works. Like, no.
Right.
Get them fully committed to the result.
There was and I'll just, on this, I will close the topic, but a friend of ours, actually Carl, he had asked if I might work with a friend of his, a really close friend,
remember
who
this.
needed some particular help. And the guy probably, I said, of course, yes, no problem. A friend of a friend, of course, I'm there. This particular fellow lived maybe 30 minutes from my house and wasn't willing to come and see me.
Yeah.
Could he
And
come
Carl
out
is
here?
in England telling you about this. Yeah.
Carl immediately just got on Voxer, our walkie-talkie app, and he said, he's not serious, forget about it. And I'm so glad that he said that, because it was exactly what I thought. As he was explaining the situation to me, I thought, yep, we have a threshold problem here. The guy doesn't want the help.
He has a threshold
The other guy
problem.
had a threshold problem. Not us. The fellow who needed the help has a threshold problem. Make people come to you. Make people go out of their way.
And make them do the change. It's them. They do the change work. You're just helping them. Chris, you might want to give us the empowering question for today.
Okay, here is
It's a couple
the
of them.
empowering question
Juns.
for episode 130. What reasons do I have for maintaining mediocrity? And what lessons have I been refusing to learn? And what will I do about it now? What benefit do I gain by hanging on to what is less than important? And what do I learn by letting go of all of it now?
Excellent. Let that sink in.
All
And I'll
right.
give you the meta 5 for today, Chris, which is about bullying.
All right.
As you know, growing up in Toronto, having come here from England as a kid, I was a very small kid. And I said before, my ears stuck out so much, my parents used to call me Dumbo. Well, not to my face, but they wondered if I was going to walk or fly. The kids call me Dumbo. And I was bullied a lot, mocked a lot as a kid. And when you're a smart, sarcastic kid, you learn ways of fighting back before you learn jujitsu and can just neck crank them. But as a very little boy, my father, being ex-British Army, was essentially almost no help to me, because he taught me to box. And you box with the Marquis de Queensberry rules, and it is Marquess, it's not Marquis. And the idea is, it's good sportsmanship and all of these things. And people who are good sports in street fights get killed. But I didn't know this as a kid. And my mom told me many years later, my dad did box in the Army, and he got his head smashed, and he was a lousy boxer. Well, there was one kid in particular on Milverton Boulevard who used to bully me. He was about a year older than me. His name was Michael. And he was quite an athletic, stocky kid, very taciturn, didn't say much, healthy looking and strong and tanned. And every time he saw me, this kid would beat me up. I mean, he would trip me so I'd fall on my head on the sidewalk. My dad said, okay, here's how you deal with it. First thing you do is you punch him in the nose, and that'll bring tears to his eyes, and then you finish him off. Like, what does that mean, finish him off, right? No idea. So I go out all confident, and there's Michael, and there's my friend Fabian, and I went over and I just punched him in the stomach. I panicked, which had almost no effect on the kid. And then he smacked me around, tripped me again, and just destroyed me again. I was crying and beaten up badly. And this went on for some time, and I never could gain an advantage. All my friends didn't jump in to help me. But then something odd happened. One day I came out of our house at 504 Milverton Boulevard, and I saw Michael across the street. I was not allowed to cross the street. I was such a little kid. I would be able to stay on our block, but I couldn't cross the road. And he was across the road in an altercation with a kid bigger than him. The kid bigger than him was maybe 6 inches taller. He was wearing like a trilby kind of hat, and he was really tough. and he beat the crap out of Michael, left him on the ground. And I hate to say this, he actually stomped on the kid's face. Now, for me to see this as a kid was horrifying. It's a horrific thing. And he just lay there on the ground, and the other guy, as he was walking away, and you could see his nose was bleeding and everything. He actually was all right, but his pride more than anything. And as the kid was walking away, I yelled across the road. I said, "Hey, kid." And he looked over and said, "Yeah?" And I said, "What's your name?" Because he was notorious now. And he said, "Michael."
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to Brain Software. This has been episode 130 with Mike Mandel, and I'm Chris Thompson. Make sure you head on over to MikeMandelHypnosis.com. We've got the Brain Software ebook for you right there on the homepage to download. And check out the events page. Come and study with us in Toronto or in London or in Las Vegas, wherever we're going to be. MikeMandelHypnosis.com/events. And you'll hear from us again in episode 131 coming up soon. Thanks again, and good night!
Hey, Chris, I got a song for you. I'm going to see how far I get in this before you start laughing. I want you to try not to laugh.
Okay, I will try not to laugh.
Once there was a girl and she bought a saw to do some carpentry. And when she was done, her brother took this saw and he gave it to me. He took the saw from her and he gave it to me. He took the saw from her and he...